Hello again. In this video, we're going to learn about adding integers and talk a little bit about opposites and maybe sneak into subtracting integers. I'll have to see how much time it takes me. So, adding integers. First things first, integers now have introduced negative numbers to us, and the adding scheme has gotten a little bit more difficult. To start us off, we'll start off nice, I hope. We have -2 plus -3. So this is what we got to acknowledge. When we're adding two things, if they're both sharing the same sign, if the signs are the same, you're just going to add the absolute value of the digits you're working with and keep the sign that they both have. So this is what we're doing. If they have the same sign, we are going to add. So, -2 plus -3, we have the same sign, so we do 2 plus 3 is 5. And now we keep the sign that they both have. Which is negative, so our answer is -5. Now, you can do this on a number line if you really were interested, but that's kind of tedious. So what I want you to think about, and we're going to try verbalizing this, is think about money. Let's say, and here, I'll write it off to the side here. Let's say you have -$2 in the bank. You owe the bank money, right? And then you, with your credit card, because the bank allows this, you can add more debt. Eventually, they're going to charge you for it. You go out and you buy a $3 drink, and you spend that money. Now you're in further debt. You've added more to your debt, so now you owe the bank $5. You don't magically not owe them anything. You've increased the debt by continuing to spend, just like our government. So, signs are the same. We add and we keep the sign that both have. Just back when we had positive numbers, we just added the 2 positive and everything was positive. Now, if we have signs that are different, so for example, we have -10 plus, I don't know, 3. Now, one's negative and the other is positive. If the signs are different, we are going to subtract. So if signs are different, we are going to take a difference, and difference is the fancy word for subtract. We are going to subtract, more importantly, the bigger absolute value. And I'm going to shorthand absolute value by the smaller absolute value. So, -10, if we take the absolute value of that, that gets us 10. The absolute value of 3 is 3. Clearly, 10 is bigger than 3. So now we take the bigger minus the smaller, and we got 10 minus 3 is 7. Now, the important part here is we keep the sign of the bigger absolute value. And what I mean by keep the sign of bigger, the original sign of the bigger absolute value, the absolute value 10 is the bigger guy, the original sign was negative, so we keep that sign. So our answer will be -7. And that's all we got to do. Alright, so let's talk about opposites. Opposites are very, very nice. Opposites, or we can call them additive inverse, is the fancy math name. We could also call them, where in more layman's terms, basically they change the sign. So, let's say we started off with 3. The opposite of 3 would be -3. And something very cool about opposites is if you take the sum of two numbers who are opposites of each other, their result will be 0. So, if we take 3 and we add it to -3, it's like saying we have $3 in the bank and we go out and spend $3. We have no money in the bank. So, get a little more practice with that. Let's say I have negative 1,000. The opposite of negative 1,000 will be positive 1,000. We just change the sign. That's it. Simple as that. And if we added the two together, the result would be 0. Alrighty. Let's keep going. Let's talk about subtraction. So subtraction is where students usually struggle. And some of you might already know that, and that's why you're sitting here watching this video. And you're saying, I can't subtract integers. The problem is subtracting is really adding the opposite. So, and I write it in a complicated way for some, and for others it makes clear sense. I like to write a statement where I have A minus B, where A is any number, could be anything, and B is any number. And they're being subtracted. So instead of subtracting, I am going to keep the first guy. He didn't ask to be subtracted, leave him alone. So we'll keep the first part. Instead of subtraction, we are going to add. So I change what he is. So instead of subtracting, we are now adding. And now we are going to take the opposite of what we're subtracting. So B here, we're going to change his sign. So most people remember it as keep, change, change. Instead of B, we'll find the opposite of B, in which we change his sign. Now this is very weird. So let's see an example. We have 4 minus 12. Instead of thinking, okay, you got $4 in the bank and you go out and spend 12, how many more do you have in the bank? You can kind of already see, hey, you started with 4, you spent 12, you spent more than you had, so you should be negative. You can change this into an addition problem. So you keep the first part, whatever it may be. Instead of subtracting, we are changing to addition. And we find the opposite of 12, which is negative 12. And 4 plus negative 12, the signs are different. We take the bigger absolute minus the smaller. 12 minus 4 is 8. And we keep the sign of the bigger, which makes sense that we should be in debt because we spent more than what we had. And that's it. The problem now is when I throw in more negatives. So this problem seems very nice. It's when we see crazy stuff like negative 4 minus 12. And I'm going to use 4 and 12 for the next few examples just to show you the slight differences based off of the signs. When you do more practice with these, you'll see all of them are of the same flavor. There's only 4 types of these. So we have negative 4 minus 12. Whatever we do, we keep the first part. So keep negative 4. Instead of subtracting, we're going to change to addition and find the opposite of 12. Now we can see we're back to adding, and adding is a sweet, sweet place. The signs are the same, and 4 plus 12 is 16, and we keep the sign they shared. Let's do another. So, let's say I have negative 4 minus negative 12. And you're like, oh, my nightmares have come true because of those negatives are everywhere. It's fine. Just breathe, okay? The first one, we have negative 4. Keep it. He didn't ask to be subtracted. Leave him alone. Instead of subtracting, we are now going to change to adding. And instead of subtracting negative 12, we are finding the opposite. The opposite of negative 12 is positive 12. Now the signs are different because now this is back to addition world. So now we've moved on. We're no longer subtracting. We take bigger absolute minus smaller. 12 minus 4 is 8. And we keep the sign of the bigger absolute. So we end up with 8. All right, one more just to see it. Let's say we had 4 minus negative 12. So, whatever you do, you keep the first part. He did not ask to be subtracted. Leave it alone. Instead of subtracting, let me keep using the same color, I'm sorry. Instead of subtracting, we are going to change that to addition. And we find the opposite of negative 12, which is positive 12. And everybody's positive, and it's good to leave on a positive note. And our final answer is 16.